In the late 19 teens, a group of Norwegian Christians started to worship here in San Pedro. And by August 11th of 1921, the Norwegian Evangelical Lutheran Church planted our church, Trinity, here on 10th and Alma. They built what the old timers that I've talked to called the Mission Church. People will say every once in a while, well, my family used to go down when the Mission Church was down on 10th and Alma. This is the corner they were talking about. You can still come down here today. It's a 5 points intersection, and I don't know what point our church was on. It'd be fun to know. In 1948, that old Mission Church was brought up 7th Street. It's the current area in the back of our sanctuary, from the sound booth and old narthex back to the entrance, the current entrance of the church. About 10 years later, 1959, the church offices were added, which is our current prayer chapel, and room 5. It was 1970 that the current multi-purpose room and office space, lounge, and youth room and current food pantry was added, greatly increasing the facility that Trinity had for ministry. In 1999-2000, Dave Palacios helped us raise the roof here, unifying the back part of the sanctuary with the front part of the sanctuary and creating such a beautiful place for us to worship the Lord. And in 2006, we purchased Trinity East, portions of which we've used for ministry and others for rental income. Because of the faithfulness of so many that have gone before us, we have a great facility. It's facilitated amazing ministry through many years. Some places have facilitated ministry without being touched for a long time, but we're so thankful for our sanctuary and for Trinity East that have recently been touched and probably don't need that much attention in the days to come. We have other areas around here that do need some attention. Think of the Sunday school wing that has just provided faithful equipping in God's Word for the young since the 1950s. I think of the Altar Guild doing their hard work week after week in the sacristy, not touched for decades. I think of Club 3 that's had some surface improvements through the years, but is in great need of attention. Think of the pantry, day in, day out, week in, week out, reaching out in outreach to the hungry. I think of catechism in this room and over in the other room. They're wonderful classes, the boys and girls class, and they are on a long line of catechesis that's reached way back as we've wanted to take seriously our call to equip the young for life of discipleship and service in God's kingdom. Did you know this is the 19th musical that God Rocks is putting on? And they've gone from pillar to post, from sanctuary to NPR, and they have a lot of moving and grooving to do. George comes and he moves stuff. Joy this week, along with Kira, I saw they were outside washing off the chairs before they moved them in, moved the communion rails so that they could welcome so many kids to help tell the story of Joseph, which they're excited to do this spring. Adult groups that meet in various places. And then our campus used by many people from the outside as we welcome them here. We're sitting in the old courtyard, and we call this the playground graveyard, actually. We don't call it that officially, but that's what we call it now because it's where good old playground equipment comes just before it gets buried. And I was just by this entrance from 7th Street reminded of a conversation I heard of just this last week. Someone who was walking past our church from 7th Street School and happened to be in conversation with someone who went to this church, and the conversation went like something like this: I didn't even know that church was open. As you walk by on 7th, you maybe would wonder if it's open. We don't want to give that impression to people. We want people to know that this is a place that's open, hospitable, ready to equip, ready to reach out, ready to grow and multiply as God calls us to do so. We're excited because maybe never before have we felt such a clarity in the sense of who we are as a welcome home community and what that might mean. And when you think of the word even facility, what does it indicate? It indicates that it's facilitating something. We don't exist for this campus or to keep this campus looking good, but this campus exists to facilitate the mission that God has called us to. How could our campus facilitate hospitality? How could it facilitate outreach? How could it facilitate multiplication now and in the years to come? How could it facilitate equipping? We've got perfect rooms for 1950s Sunday school when kids used to sit around a table. But our kids ministry is changed so much. There's adaptable space that's needed, an active space, an artistic, creative space, and space for drama to be used and storytelling. It's exciting, the days we live in as far as ministry goes. We got the perfect amount of parking for the 1950s when people used to walk to church. But now people drive. It's an automobile culture that we live in, and we need increased parking space. Many areas, and we wouldn't even know them all, but what we're hoping is that you'll go with us in these next months as we say, God, how can this space that you've granted us so richly, how can we steward it so that it facilitates the mission that you're calling us to now? For it has been so good for these last nearly 100 years. We're looking forward for the 100 years to come. Let's go together.